Okay, so very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear students and academic community. First and foremost, I would like to appreciate the efforts made by the Department of Accountancy and Finance, headed by Professor T.U.I. Piris, in developing this program and delivering it to the students of the Sabaragamuwa University of Sri Lanka and also the undergraduates in various other universities in Sri Lanka and beyond. So next, I would like to thank the Dean of the Faculty and the academic staff, the resource panel who have contributed to this program um, in contributing and also delivering this program to the level we expected. So today we are going to discuss on one of the most important topics. So that is the rationale for methodology selection, choosing the right design for quantitative research. And also I have taken a part for the mixed method research because there is no session in order to discuss the rationale for mixed method research in this entire program. So I have taken that part as well. So after completion of this session, you will be able to understand different type of research designs which are coming under quantitative and mixed method design, then understand the rationale for quantitative research design, and also you will be able to understand the rationale for selecting mixed method research design as well. So remember one thing, when we are conducting our research, it is important to rationalize our study, which is essential. So outline of today's discussion, so that will be based on, so first I'll go through the introduction, then I'll explain what you mean by a research design, then type of research designs under the quantitative approach and also under the mixed method research design as well. Then finally, I will discuss the rationale for selection of an appropriate research design for quantitative research designs and also mixed method research designs as well. So if you have any questions during the session, so you can write your questions in the Q&A. So in the meantime, I can answer. So when you are, putting your questions in the Q&A section. So before we discuss anything, I would like to pinpoint some areas which is essential in order to develop our discussion further. So that is based on the research onion. Research onion that basically describe so the essential elements, essential parts, or the building blocks of your research study. So starting from the outer design, outer layer, so you can see the philosophies here. So the next layer that is devoted for the approaches, the next layer that is for research strategies, we call it as research design as well. Then we do have the research choices, then the time horizon, then the data collection and analysis. So when it comes to philosophies that is essential. Philosophies explain how you see the world. So how it is related to your research. So, and also how the knowledge is obtained. So how you see the world, so that is explained by ontology, whereas how the knowledge is obtained, that is explained by the epistemology. So when it comes to the how you see the world, so we can see different philosophies here. So starting from positivism, interpretivism, pragmatism, and realism, you can see. So positivism, that is basically based on the objectivity. So meaning that, positivist researchers, they believe that there is an objective reality to the research or to the research you are conducting. So positivist researchers, they do not believe on personal experiences and values. So in contrast to the positivist, the interpretivist or under the interpretivism, the interpretivist researchers, they believe on subjectivity, and they believe that there are multiple realities regarding a phenomenon. There can be multiple realities. So there are not objectivity. And also, they basically value, where they basically respect personal experiences and values. They believe on that. So when it comes to realism, realist researchers, they basically investigate the cause with regard to a phenomenon. So what is the cause? So the pragmatism, that is the other way around, pragmatist researchers, they are basically pragmatist, so practical researchers. So they basically believe on what work best for their study. So you know that positivism and interpretivism, these are contrasting philosophies, because positivists, they believe on objectivity, whereas interpretivists, so they believe on the subjectivity. So pragmatist researchers, so they believe on what work best for them. So for positivism, so and interpretivism, the paradigmatic assumptions are contradictory. However, pragmatists believe that so even we can proceed with both the positivist and interpretivist paradigms in a one study. So there is a room for that by having a kind of overarching paradigm. So pragmatists, they believe on a practical approach where so we can easily conduct our research without relying on paradigmatic differences or paradigmatic assumptions, differences in paradigmatic assumptions. So the next layer in the research onion, that is for the research approaches. So when it comes to research approaches, so here you can see deductive and inductive approaches are there. So induction, that is a theory building approach. So induction in the sense that that is in relation to the qualitative approach, and there is an exploration needed for induction. Remember that. So inductive research, that is basically coming from the interpretivism paradigm. So when it comes to deduction or deductive approach, that is coming from the positivism paradigm, where we can test the theories. So induction, it is a theory building approach. Deduction or deductive approach, it is a theory testing approach. So the next layer, that is devoted for strategies. So we call this layer as research designs as well. Today, we are going to highlight on the research designs, particular research design under the quantitative approach and also the mixed method approach. We are going to discuss 6 major designs for each design, each major design. So here in these strategies or the research designs, so here you can see only experiment, survey, case study, action research, grounded theory, ethnography, and archival research. But remember that there are 18 strategies in this layer. So due to a space issue, so it is not mentioned all the strategies here in this layer, but strategies, under the strategies, you can see 18 strategies. So 6 designs or strategies for the quantitative, 6 designs or strategies for qualitative, and also under mixed method, you can see 6 major research designs. So if you take the experiment and survey here, so that is coming under the quantitative approach, whereas case study, action research, grounded theory, ethnography, and archival research mentioned in this layer, that is coming under the qualitative. So here you can see there is a relationship between these layers as well. So interpretivism, that deals with the induction, induction deals with the qualitative research or qualitative strategies. Qualitative strategies, so we can see there are 6 qualitative strategies or designs other than the case study, action research, grounded theory, ethnography, archival research. So we can see phenomenological research. Likewise, there are 6 major designs under that. So similarly, in the quantitative design also, we can see experiment and non-experiment designs. Under the experiment designs, we can see 63 strategies again under the experiment design. And under the non-experiment design, we can see, 1 minute. So as I stated, under the quantitative design also, so under the experiment, we can see there are 3 strategies. Those are pre-experimental, then quasi-experimental and through experimental. There are 3 again. Non-experimental, survey design is there, survey strategy is there. Then causal comparative research design is there. Then we do have the correlational design. So there are 6 under the quantitative. So everything is not mentioned here. So as I stated, in the third layer, so we can see 16 strategies or designs altogether. So out of which we are going to discuss 12 strategies today, 6 under the quantitative design and 6 under the mixed method design. So we are going to discuss all 12 strategies or research designs and the rationale for it as well. So when it comes to the choices, so here you can see there are 3 research choices. You know, mono method, the meaning that so you are basically applying a single method or single methodology. So when it comes to mixed method, so you know that it is a combination of qualitative and quantitative research methodologies in a single study. So you know the mixed method as well. But when it comes to multi-method, so what do you mean by the multi-method? Multi-method, so here you can see mono-method, that is for a single methodology you are applying. So it can be either qualitative methodology or quantitative methodology. So it is a mono-method study. So mixed method, it is a use of both quali and quanti methodologies in a single study. So what do you mean by multi-method then? So in the strategies layer, so you can see there are different strategies. Even under the qualitative, so you can see case study, action research, grounded theory, ethnography, and archival research. So if you are conducting your research utilizing 2 set of strategies which are coming under the same paradigm, same tradition. We call it as multi-method. What do you mean by same paradigm or same tradition? Same set of assumptions. For an example, so under the qualitative, here you can see case study and action research there. Case study and grounded theory there. Action research and ethnography is there. So if you are conducting your research, for an example, utilizing case study and grounded theory, so then it is a kind of similar type of 2 strategies in a single study. So we call it as multi-method. There is no mixed method here because both the designs are coming under the qualitative research approach. So that's why the multi-method, so it is a use of more than 1 or more, 2 or more than same set of strategies in a single study. So when it comes to the time horizon, you can see cross-sectional and longitudinal studies are there. Cross-sectional in the sense that, so you collect the data in a single point in time, whereas the longitudinal studies, so you collect data more than once in the time horizon with a purpose in order to see whether there is a change after an incident or after a manipulation. So then at the middle, so you can see data collection and data analysis. So the research onion that helps you to understand the entire research you conduct. It can be either qualitative study or a quantitative study or a mixed method study. So if you are conducting a mixed method study, so your pillars of it is coming from the pragmatism. So likewise, for an example, if you are conducting a qualitative study, so your philosophy that is coming from the interpretivism, and the research approach is inductive, So you can have a strategy under that. And also, you are basically proceeding with the monomethod study. So likewise. So next, so after having some kind of understanding with regard to the research onion, next I would like to discuss what do you mean by a research design? So that is also important before discussing any design. So I know that you have discussed and Professor Rangan has done a good session with regard to the qualitative design. So you have some kind of understanding with regard to the research design. But anyway, so I would like to highlight some of the key areas so that will basically help us in order to understand the research design for quantitative and also research design for mixed method research today. So research design, it is the overall plan that is in order to connect the conceptual research problems into the pertinent and achievable empirical research. For an example, so assume that you are going for an annual trip. So you will have some kind of an overall plan. If it is a 2 days plan, 2 days annual trip, so you will list down everything, including your, I mean, foods, accommodation. So when you are leaving the first day, so the entire day, so you will have a plan for that. So from where you are starting, which places you are visiting, at what time you are having your lunch, and from where you are going to have your lunch, and how the lunch is prepared and so on, everything that will be mapped before you go for a trip. So similarly, it is overall plan about your annual trip. Similarly, when you are conducting your research, you should have an overall plan. So the overall plan for a research, that is the research design. So it is an inquiry which provides a specific direction for procedures in a research, as it's stated by Creswell. So research design help us to translate our research problem into data analysis, then to the discussion, to the interpretation, in order to explain the meaning of your results as well. So finally, it will answer your research questions. So the research design, so that is one of the most important areas in your research. So you have to remember that. So research design, it basically consisted with many components. So it will basically highlight what sort of information is needed. So it can be secondary data, primary data. If it is primary data, if it is through, whether it is through observations, whether it is through qualitative interviews, whether it is through survey data. So likewise, so it will specify the information needed. It can be either quantitative data or qualitative information as well. Or it can be primary data or secondary data as well. So in addition to that, the research design, it will initially explain basically from which paradigm it is coming from. It can be from interpretivism, it can be from positivism, it can be from pragmatism and so on. Then the approaches that can be inductive or deductive. So you have to explain everything, including whether it is explanatory study, meaning that a quantitative study, or an exploratory study, meaning that a qualitative study. So descriptive in the sense that it is again a synonym for quantitative study, and mixed pace of research as well. Then how we are going to measure the constructs. So if it is a qualitative study, construct measurement. So we call concept as constructs in most of the time in qualitative studies, because in construct, abstractness is really high. The reason is that in concept, so we can have less level of abstractness, so meaning that so we can measure it easily. So in addition to that, the research design should explain how the questionnaire is developed, the operationalization part of it. Then if it is a qualitative study, what sort of questions we should ask. So it should be basically clearly explained. In addition to that, so the sampling process, sampling technique, whether it is non-probability sampling or probability sampling, if it is non-probability sampling, so whether it is convenience sampling or purposive or judgmental sampling or snowball sampling or likewise, or if it is on probability sampling, what sort of probability sampling, whether it is stratified random, simple random, systematic random, likewise. And also the sample size justification. Why did you take that kind of a sample size and so on? So the research design should explain the sampling design as well. So in addition to that, you should have at the end, so you should have a kind of a plan for data analysis as well. By looking at your conceptual model, so or a theoretical model, theoretical framework, if it is a qualitative study. So we can basically explain what sort of plan we should have for the data analysis. By simply looking at that, so we can explain what sort of a plan we should, what sort of techniques we should use for data analysis. Here you can see broad type of research designs. These are the broad research designs we can see. So in broad level, so we can see exploratory research design. So it is basically qualitative research design. So it requires a kind of a exploration. And also you can see descriptive research designs as well. Descriptive research designs are the quantitative research design. And also you can see mixed method research designs as well. So as I stated, we can see there are 6 designs under the qualitative exploratory research design, 6 design under the explanatory or descriptive research design, and again 6 sub-designs under the mixed method design as well. So when it comes to the descriptive nature of research design, so the quantitative research design, so it is again twofold. So we can see cross-sectional designs and longitudinal designs. Cross-sectional designs, so we collect data in a single point in time, whereas in the longitudinal studies, so we collect data more than a single time in its time horizon with a purpose of seeing the behavior or seeing the changes after an incident. So if you are manipulating an independent variable, so you are going to see what sort of changes it has taken over by basically employing the longitudinal designs. So when it comes to cross-sectional design, then again, it is also twofold: single cross-sectional design and multiple cross-sectional design. So if you are collecting data only in a single point in time, and it is collected from a single sample, we call it as single cross-sectional design. So single sample. If you are collecting data from more than one sample, we call it as multiple cross-sectional data. For an example, assume that you are conducting research, investigating the service quality of the delivery of the lectures at the Faculty of Management Studies. Let's take that example. If you are investigating it from the perspective of students, so that is one sample. If you are, investigating it from a perspective of academics, so it is another sample. So then you can basically conduct your study having multiple samples in order to have multiple perspectives on board. So the phenomenon which is being investigated, how you see the phenomenon, that is different from one sample to another sample. So you are basically discussing it. So you can have multiple cross sections in your study as well, if it is quantitative. So the first half of the session that is devoted for research designs, in order to explain what are the research designs we can see under the quantitative and mixed method design. the second part, so I'll touch upon the rationale for such designs. So I'm going to discuss rationale for each design as well, so which is essential. So after completion of this research, by simply looking at the title, so you can say, so this is the appropriate design for this. So by looking at the title itself, you can say what sort of design we can utilize for the study. So when it comes to research design, so as I stated, there are 6 major designs under the quantitative. So 6 major designs under the qualitative and 6 major designs under the mixed method as well. So you could remember. Now we are going to discuss the quantitative designs and mixed method designs. So I'm not going to touch upon the qualitative, which is covered last week. So under the quantitative design, so we can see quantitative designs are twofold. So as I stated earlier, so it can be either experimental or non-experimental. So under the experimental research, so you can see there are 3 sub-designs under the experimental design. In addition to that, under the non-experimental design, so again, you can see there are 3 sub-designs under the non-experimental design as well. So we will discuss one by one with regard to these experimental and non-experimental in order to have a better understanding about the research designs under the quantitative design. Then under the mixed method design, here you can see 6 designs are there. So how these 6 designs are derived and what do you mean by these designs, we are going to discuss within the course of next 30 minutes. So when it comes to the quantitative research design, so the quantitative design broadly. So what do you mean by a quantitative design? First, we will look at that. So quantitative designs basically, so quantitative designs use techniques and measurements that basically produces the quantifiable or discrete values as explained by Kothari. So the collected data that is basically resulted from empirical observations and measures as well. So most of the time, quantitative data, so we are taking for this. So this is broadly coming under the positivism. In the positivism, so the positivist researchers, they basically regard the world as being outside of the researchers, and also they believe on the objectivity. So they believe that objective reality is there, so which is independent of any observations. So quantitative design, that is always linked with the hypothesis testing. So in qualitative, it is not the hypothesis, it is propositions. So mathematical and statistical data analytical approach, so we can see in the quantitative research design. So the conclusions that can be derived as per the objectives or questions. So everything is linked, starting from the research questions to objectives, from objectives to hypothesis, from hypothesis to conceptual framework, then conceptual framework to the operationalization, then the data analysis and the discussion, everything is linked here. Remember that. So now we are going to discuss experimental research designs. So as I stated, quantitative research design, that is twofold, experimental design and non-experimental design. So as I stated, experimental design, there are 3 designs altogether. And in non-experimental design, so we can see another 3 sub-designs as well. So altogether there are 6. So experimental research that is conducted with a purpose. With a purpose. There is a rationale for conducting the experimental research. The rationale is that, so here in the, if you are manipulating an independent variable, So if you need to see whether there is a change after the manipulation, so you should proceed with experiment. So this is a kind of an investigation where one or more independent variable that is manipulated in order to measure the effect on one or more dependent variables. So here, the cause and effect relationship of a subject, it is being measured. And there are three types of experimental designs. The first design is pre-experimental design. Pre-experimental design. So here, in the pre-experimental design, researchers most of the time, they study a single group and provide some kind of intervention during the experiment. For an example, you could remember during the COVID-19 period, Vatupitivala Hospital, they basically tested a kind of a medicine for COVID, you could remember, so-called Dhammikapaniya. So Vatupitivala Hospital, they tested. So assume that if the Dhammikapaniya that is given to the entire ward without having a control group or without taking participants on random basis. So you are basically, there is no control group. Control group in the sense that you are giving Dhammikapaniya to one set of people, other set of people you are not giving. So likewise, there is a control group here in order to see whether there is a difference. So assume that you do not have such. So meaning that you are conducting a pre-experimental design. So you do not have a control group. So you are basically utilizing a single group. So the problem here is the patients, they can basically survive. The survival, we cannot say it is just because of the Dhammikapaniya. If you are having a control group, so having the same set of conditions, and only the change you are basically giving or manipulating is the Dhammikapaniya, so you can easily say, the survival is just because of the Dhammikapaniya. So you can say. So here there is no control group to compare with the experimental group. So pre-experimental design. So this is the least type of experimental design. So the validity of this design is very less, very less. It is criticized all over the world. So assume that you are going to have a control group. So for a one word, so you are giving the Dhammikapaniya, and for the other word, so you are not giving the Dhammikapaniya. So there are two words you basically consider. Two words you consider for one word, so you are giving Dhammikapaniya, other word you are not giving. So here you are having a control group. So here, in the quasi-experiment, we call this type of experiment as quasi-experiment. Here, the quasi-experiments where the researcher use control and experimental groups, but does not randomly assign participants for the group. So the participation, no, you are not giving the Dhammikapaniya to the entire group, but for a sample is not selected on random basis. So all the participants, they do not have equal chance to being selected for the sample. There is a question in this as well. The reason is that the selection, there is a bias. There is a bias. So by limiting that bias or eliminating that bias, so you can have the true experiment where you are having an experimental group and also the control group. The participant for the experimental group and participant for the control group, both are selected on a random manner. So then we call it as true experiment. So which has the highest validity in experimental designs. So through experiment, where the researcher randomly assign the participants through the treatment groups. So this has the highest validity. So as I stated, the experimental designs, so we can see there are three experimental designs: pre-experimental design, quasi-experiment design, and the through experiment design. So the best is the through experiment design, because all the participants, they do have equal opportunity to be selected for the sample. So when it comes to non-experimental design, non-experimental research, so there are three types of non-experimental research as well. The survey method, causal comparative research, and the third one is correlational design. So non-experimental research, so as I stated, so that is coming under the quantitative design broadly. So survey method, so it provides a numeric description of attitudes, opinions, or trends of a population by studying a sample of that population. You know how the survey is conducted. So measurable concepts we measure through surveys. If you cannot measure the concepts, we call it them as constructs. And we proceed with qualitative approaches for that in order to provide some, propositions, and also in order to investigate, explore the phenomena. So survey method that is descriptive in nature. So it can be either cross-sectional or longitudinal. So meaning that the sample that can be basically selected in a single point in time or more than a single point in time. So main advantage of survey, that is we can use a large data set, not like qualitative studies. So we can have a large data set and we can basically generalize it. So main drawback in survey, that is basically sampling errors, sampling biases, and so on. For an example, if you take determinants of mobile payment adoption during the pandemic, evidence from Nepal, mobile payment adoption, it is a heavily investigated topic. There are so many theories that explain the adoption of mobile payment, starting from technology adoption model, UTAT theory, extended version of UTAT theory, theory of planned behavior, theory of reason action, likewise. So from these theoretical perspectives, so you can develop your own conceptual framework with justifications. And you can measure the relationship between the concepts, what are the determinants of mobile payment adoption. So in order to, adopt the mobile payment solutions, what are the factors affecting, what are the determinants you are investigating. So you can do a survey for this. The reason is that, so we know this is highly theorized. So then the mobile payment adoption, we can measure it. And there are already developed instruments for that, so that you can develop a questionnaire and collect data and proceed with a survey. So in order to see whether you can conduct a survey, so you should understand that whether these concepts are measurable, whether there are instruments in order to measure those concepts as well. That is essential. So in the literature review, the one session before the last session, so we discuss about the conceptualization, then operationalization. So part of the research. So the next design under the non-experimental research, that is causal comparative research and also the correlational design. Causal comparative research, that is basically comparing two groups or more. So this comparison is performed with respect to a cause. For an example, a cause that can be an independent variable which has already occurred. For an example, to find the relationship between independent and dependent variables after an action or event occurred. So here you can see whether the independent variables influence the dependent variables using two or more groups of individuals. So here you are comparing. So we call it as causal comparative research. For an example, whether completing a computer-based accounting program has an impact on accounting score of the examination. So if you are investigating, utilizing two or more groups, so we call it as causal comparative research. So correlational design, that is the other way around. Researcher here applies the correlational statistics in order to measure and describe the degree of association among the variables or set of variables. For an example, the relationship between a dependent variable and independent variable and dependent variable. So we can investigate it utilizing the correlational design. So most of the time, finance, accountancy field we utilize the correlational design. Most of the time we utilize historic data in order to proceed with correlational design. Remember that. So not only that, even the survey research, we proceed with correlational design. So as we discuss, there are three non-experimental designs and three experimental designs under the quantitative paradigm or quantitative research design broadly. These are the sub-designs under quantitative design. So we have to discuss what is the rationale for selecting such designs, which is essential. So what is the deciding factor for such designs? We should have that understanding as undergraduates. So next, I'm going to discuss some of the mixed method designs before discussing the rationale, which is essential. So mixed method research. So foundation for mixed method research that was laid during 1959 period. So when the Campbell and Fiske, so they studies the mixed methods in their research. So there is a raising or the concern among the researchers whether we can, mix qualitative and quantitative in a same study because of the paradigmatic differences with regard to the assumptions. So you could remember, so I stated that in interpretivism paradigm, so the researchers, so they believe on subjectivity and they believe that there can be multiple realities with regard to a phenomenon. But in quantitative, so they believe on the positivist, they believe on the objectivity, and they do not believe on multiple realities with regard to a phenomenon. And also they do not care about the personal experiences and values. So these are the paradigmatic differences among Colli and Conti. So the question here is, when there are paradigmatic differences in the research designs, so how come we can integrate? Because in theory also, we do not integrate the theories which has competing set of assumptions. Here, these methodologies or the paradigms, it has competing set of assumptions. But from a pragmatist point of view, what works best for you, which is coming under pragmatism in philosophy. So they believe on what works best despite the differences. They believe that by having an overarching paradigm, so we can mix Colli and Conti. So data collection and analysis, not only that, not only the data collection, but also the analysis. So should be conducted for both Colli and Conti in mixed method research. So when to collect the qualitative data, when to collect the quantitative data, when to proceed with qualitative analysis, when to proceed with quantitative analysis, that raises a question among us. Whether to proceed with quantitative first, whether to proceed with qualitative phase first, whether to provide higher weightage for qualitative phase, or to provide higher weightage for quantitative phase. So those are the growing concerns among the researchers. By looking at 4 criterion: timing, weighting, mixing, and theorizing. So Crystal basically came up with 6 major designs for mixed method research. These 4 factors are timing in the sense whether to proceed with quantitative phase first or qualitative phase first or concurrent basis. So whether there is a sequential order, quantitative followed up by qualitative, or quantitative with qualitative at the same time, we call it as concurrent phase. So timing. So then weighting. So what sort of a weightage you should give? Whether to provide higher weightage for quantitative, whether to proceed with higher weightage for qualitative pace. So that is a question. Then mixing. Mixing in the sense that when to mix the data analysis part. Mixing. Theorizing in the sense that whether to proceed with a single theory or multiple theory. So theorizing part. Whether to provide higher weightage for theorizing part or not. So based on these 4 criterion, Creswell basically developed 6 major research designs for mixed method research. So here you can see there are 6 major designs under the mixed method design. Those are sequential explanatory design, sequential exploratory design, sequential transformative design, concurrent triangulation strategy, concurrent embedded strategy, concurrent transformative strategy. So names are difficult, but the name itself, it provides what sort of a strategy it is. For an example, sequential, if it is sequential, so it says that there is a sequence, one after another. There is a sequence. So meaning that, so we can understand the first 3 designs, they are sequence. They are in a sequence order. So meaning that one after another. Sequential explanatory design. You know, explanatory is descriptive research, meaning that quantitative research. Explanatory research, synonym for explanatory research, that is descriptive research or quantitative research. So meaning that here sequential explanatory design, so meaning that there is a sequence, but the explanatory part has given more weightage or explanatory part comes first. So in the sequential explanatory design, the design is that quantitative data collection and analysis followed up by the qualitative data collection and analysis. So meaning that in the sequential explanatory design, first you proceed with the quantitative data collection and analysis, and more weightage is given for quantitative phase. Then you proceed with the qualitative data collection and analysis, less weightage is given for that. So here you can see in this table, in the 3rd row, explanatory. So here, sequence is there. Quantitative followed by qualitative, you can see. Weighting, that is equal. Usually quantitative, because quantitative comes first. So the quantitative phase is given the higher weightage. So that is the sequential explanatory design. Quantitative research design followed up by the qualitative research design. So we call it as sequential explanatory design. So what do you mean by sequential exploratory? That is also a question we do have. Sequential exploratory in the sense that there is a sequence, one followed up by another. But exploratory part is given higher weightage and it comes first, meaning that qualitative data collection and analysis at the first phase, followed up by the quantitative. Qualitative data collection and analysis, you are giving more weightage for that. More weightage is given for qualitative data collection and analysis in the sequential exploratory design. There is a sequence again, quali followed up by quanti. More weightage is given for quali. In which instances we can use sequential explanatory and sequential exploratory? That is also a question we do have. In which occasions we can use? So give me 1 minute. In which occasions we can use sequential exploratory or sequential explanatory? For an example, assume that you are dealing with two concepts or two constructs. So one concept, so you can measure. One concept you can measure, meaning that abstractness is very low and measurements are there in order to measure the same. One concept or construct you are investigating, there are no measurements available. Sometimes researchers use proxies in order to measure that construct. And you identify that these proxies do not really measure the construct. There are constructs in finance domain also. So the proxies which have been used, we do not know whether the objective reality is measured. So because positivists, they believe on objective reality. So they believe on objectivity. So there is a question. One variable or one concept that can be measured, instruments are there in order to measure, but one concept or construct, abstractness is very high. The measurable level, it is very low. You can't measure it. There are no measurements available in order to measure that construct. You are in a problem. So the best thing is to explore the phenomena first, explore the construct first, and to develop an instrument in order to measure that construct. So the measurement development or instrument development, it is a qualitatively bounded approach. You should exploit first. Exploit first. You should understand what you really mean by the construct and what are the characteristics of constructs. So then you have to have a deep dive into the construct or phenomena and understand it. You will do so many qualitative interviews with different stakeholders, and ultimately you identify a way to measure the same. So in this kind of a research, qualitative part plays a vital role. So you have to proceed with qualitative instrument development part first. Even you can test the same utilizing mixed methodology. But so once the instrument is developed, in order to measure that abstract construct, so then you have measurements for both variables, dependent, independent. the concept that can be measured, instruments are there already. The second construct, that is also we have developed an instrument to measure it. So meaning that in that construct, we identified the dimensions, we identified the indicators, so we have an instrument to test it. So then, the qualitative pace plays a vital role. Qualitative pace plays a vital role because first you develop an instrument through qualitative pace. So in that scenario, the second approach you can take in this situation is the quantitative approach in order to test the relationship between these two variables. That is the quantitative part, pace. So quantitative pace, that is secondary. First, you have to proceed with qualitative phase. So qualitative followed up by quantitative, which is sequential exploratory. In that situation, that is an occasion where you can utilize the sequential exploratory design. For an example, another example, sequential explanatory design. When to use explanatory design? When to use an explanatory design. So you have instruments developed in order to measure the concepts, but you need to have some kind of a confirmation with regard to the phenomenon being investigated. So that first you will proceed with the quantitative phase and have some kind of a small group of participants conduct some in-depth interview, and it will provide some kind of a confirmation with regard to the quantitative findings. So the qualitative phase here, that plays a supportive role. So in order to have a confirmation, here the approach, overall design, that is sequential explanatory design, quantitative followed up by qualitative. So likewise. The third, without taking much time, so I'll explain the rest as well. I'm not going to explain the examples for each because it will take some time, because otherwise, so the time will not be available for me in order to discuss the rationale. If you have any questions, so you can put them in the Q&A box, so you can easily post there. So the third approach with regard to the mixed methods research, that is sequential transformative design. In the sequential transformative design, it clearly says there is a sequence. It can be either quantitative or it can be qualitative first. There is a sequence. What do you mean by transformative? Transformative in the sense that theory plays a vital role here. Transformative, meaning that theory plays a major role here. So we discuss about 4 factors: timing, weighting, mixing, and theorizing. So here in the third design, theorizing plays a vital role. There is a sequence. It can be either sequential exploratory or explanatory, but theories plays a vital role. For an example, so you are basically investigating the mobile technology, mobile payment adoption again. So you are going to conduct a mixed method study in order to have a confirmation. It is a kind of a then sequential explanatory design, quantitative followed up by the qualitative. Quantitative followed up by the qualitative. But, so there are so many theories which explain the technology adoption, mobile payment adoption. The technology adoption model, extended version of technology adoption model saw there. So after Davis in 1989, so then UTAT model, expanded versions of UTAT model, theory of reason action, well, I mean, one of the oldest theories. Then theory of planned behavior. So there are so many theories. So theories plays a vital role here. So then we can do this study utilizing the sequential transformative design. There is a sequence, but more weightage is given for what? Theorizing. So timing, so you can have either quanti followed up by quali or quali followed up by quanti. So then the fourth design, that is concurrent triangulation strategy. In the concurrent, here triangulation here, the first row. So the timing, it is concurrent, meaning that you are conducting both quanti and quali phases at the same time. Weightage, that is usually equal. Here, you are basically proceeding with data collection at the same time. For both quali and quanti, data collection at the same time, data analysis at the same time. So we call that a strategy as concurrent triangulation strategy. The fifth one, concurrent embedded strategy. The data collection and analysis of both phases, it is concurrent in the fifth strategy or fifth design. That is in the same time, but it is embedded. Embedded in the sense that, so it is coming from the mixing factor. So we were discussing about four factors, four criterion in order to design these 6 major designs: timing, weighting, mixing, and theorizing. From mixing, Creswell derived this concurrent embedded strategy through mixing only. When to mix? Mixing in the sense that, so for an example, I'll take an example for these as well, otherwise you will not understand. Concurrent embedded strategy in the sense that, so you are proceeding with the data collection and analysis with regard to the mobile payment adoption by having 1,000 participants on board, surveying them. 1,000 participants, sample size is 1,000. You are conducting a survey. So in the meantime, you need to have some kind of a confirmation. There are some contradictory findings across the past few decades with regard to the phenomenon. So then you are going to have a single consensus within the study itself, so that you are basically majorly proceeding with the survey. Then out of 1,000 participants, you are going to interview 10 to 15 based on the saturation point. So you can decide the sample size, a minimal number of sample or representatives in order to proceed with qualitative in-depth interviews. So here, from the same sample, you are interviewing at the same time. So the data collection is happening at the same time. So then that is concurrent. But quantitative part, 1,000 participants are basically used for the survey. So the quantitative phase plays a major role, whereas qualitative phase plays a supportive role. We call it as concurrent embedded strategy. One design plays a major role here. The quantitative design survey, that plays the major role, and qualitative design plays the supportive role. So we call that strategy as concurrent embedded strategy. So then the last strategy, it is concurrent transformative, meaning that data collection and analysis with regard to quali and quanti phase, it is on concurrent manner, but theories plays a vital role. Transformative, it is for theories. So based on theorizing, we can see here 2 major designs. Based on timing, we can see 3 designs, sequential and also concurrent. Based on mixing, we can see only 1, that is concurrent embedded. So there can be some multiple other approaches which Creswell has not discussed with regard to this phenomenon. So there can be some other options available as well. For an example, sequential embedded. It can be there. There is a sequence, quanti followed up by quali. So you are collecting data quanti first. Then from the quanti sample, 1,000 participants, at the second stage, so you are basically interviewing 10 people. in the second page. So it is a sequential embedded strategy. So there can be multiple other strategies likewise, but researchers have not declared those yet. So with that, so we can understand there are 6 major designs for quantitative research design broadly and 6 major designs for mixed method design. Now we are going to discuss the rationale for the selection. Rationale for selection of such designs. Rationale for selecting quantitative design, rationale for selecting mixed method design. So next part is devoted for the same. So if there are any questions, so we can answer. So Sajid, can you add me as a co-host? So then I can see the Q&A. So now I cannot see the Q&A.
Okay, sure, sir.
So no open questions yet, I guess. So now
We don't have questions, sir, so far.
Now we are going to discuss the rationale for selecting the research design. That is the second part of our discussion. So rationale for selecting a research design. The decision start when reviewing the literature in order to explore the research gap, in order to understand the concepts and constructs, in order to understand the research questions and objectives as well. So decision start when reviewing the literature first. I'll give you an example. So if you have a research area at your hand or research topic at your hand, the first thing you should do, that is the literature survey. You should do a literature survey with regard to the area or topic you are investigating. So when you are doing the literature review, you will understand that there are concepts, theories, hypotheses with regard to the topic or area you are investigating. And you can see interrelationship between the variables or concepts, and it can be easily operationalized. Easily operationalized means that, so you can basically narrow down it to the operation level, easily measurable. So if you see when you are exploring the literature, so the variables are there, interrelationships you can see, the dimensions you can identify, indicators are there, the variables, there are interrelationships you can see, testable theories are there, hypotheses are there that can be tested. So then your initial decision is to proceed with the quantitative design. Remember that. But it can be varied based on the second, third, fourth stages of your research process. Remember that. But the initial decision is start with reviewing the literature. For an example, assume that you are reviewing the literature and there are no dimensions, no variables, no indicators. So you cannot see the constructs or even their propositions. So you cannot even see hypotheses and concepts and relationship. And you also cannot see constructs, their meaning, and also propositions as well. So meaning that an exploration is required with regard to the phenomenon that you are investigating. So meaning that. So you need an exploration. so that you should proceed with a qualitative design. So that's why I stated that the decision start when reviewing the literature in order to explore the research gaps until derive specific questions or objectives. When you are doing this exercise, you will see, oh, so the quantitative is the suited methodology for this. Qualitative is the suited methodology for this. Or mixed method is the suited methodology for this. Mixed method is suited when there are no instrument development. So instrument development and testing, the best methodology is the mixed method approach. Instrument development and testing. I have seen most of the researchers, undergraduate researchers, for some concepts and constructs. So you develop your own indicators. So by having some kind of understanding, so you just, develop the indicators for those dimensions or variables. Wrong, it is wrong. So you can't do it. It should be from the previous literature. Otherwise, you should proceed with proper instrument development procedure, which is very difficult than a simple research. Remember that that is a kind of a PhD level study, instrument development and testing. IDT, we call it as instrument development and testing, a difficult procedure. So as I stated, at the first place, we can have some kind of understanding whether, so I should proceed with Colli or Conti. But remember that the research questions or problems or the objectives guide which research design to select. The research design, which design? Whether to proceed with the phenomenological study, whether to proceed with a grounded theory approach, whether to proceed with non-experimental survey research, whether to proceed with experimental through experiment design. So whether to proceed with which design, that should be based on the nature of the research questions or problems you do have at your hand. Remember that. So most of the time, our researchers, what they do is they translate, or they are having a transition to their lenient methodology. They are conversion with. So they are proceeding with it. So adjusting the everything, adjusting the questions to suit the methodology, he is well concerned about. But the best way is not that. So you should align your methodology or research design in line with the research nature of the research questions or problem or objective. That is the first thing. In addition to that, most of the time in the real world, researchers, they proceed with a particular research design based on their interest. So for an example, if I am very conversant with correlational design, so I'll change everything in accordance with the correlational design and proceed with it. And if I am I do have competencies in quantitative, so I'll proceed with quantitative. So if I am well experienced in quantitative, so I'll proceed with quantitative. But there is a problem here. So there is a significant deviation here when they are proceeding like that, because it is not in line with the research question. Most of the time, so selecting the research design, then changing the question in order to suit the particular design. So that is what we are doing right now today. But when it comes to the level of PhDs and above, so we do not consider researchers' interest, competencies, and experience. Instead of that, we proceed with the nature of the research problem we do have at our hand. In addition to that, resource availability, whether, for an example, if you want to do a experiment design, so whether the resources are there, the technology is there, instruments are there, whether it is highly expensive. So if it is highly expensive, so without doing that, so you will proceed with another design. So that is also a deciding factor. In most of the time, in countries like Sri Lanka, universities, state universities like us, we do have, lot of issues in resources, not only in technologies, not only in instruments to test things. For an example, assume that you are in psychology. You are expert in psychology. You need to do psychological research. So to see how brain works. So there are instruments you can use in order to, fix it to your brain. So to your head. So those are very expensive, not available here in Sri Lanka. So based on that, you will not proceed with it. But the best suited approach is that. Remember that. Due to these, issues, we basically proceed with our, available methodology, or without proceeding with the appropriate one, we will proceed with whatever the methodology we can utilize. In addition to that, we select the methodology or design based on the audience we do have as well. For an example, I'll take an example for this. Assume that I'm an undergraduate researcher. So I'm working in another state university. So we are highly focusing on quantitative research. So as an undergraduate researcher, so I'll select a quantitative design because most of the experts or the supervisors are from quantitative paradigm. So as an undergraduate research, my audience, who are my audience? So first, my supervisor, second, my examiners, then the panel, then the peers. So then we need to, satisfy the audience. So in order to proceed with that, so I'll select Conti. So based on the audience also, we select particular design. So these are the factors basically we consider when we are selecting a particular research design. Let's discuss now. So what sort of research questions or nature of research questions for quantitative designs and mixed method designs? Now that we are going to discuss the same. Give me 1 minute. So in this slide, we are going to discuss research questions that lead for research design, quantitative research design. So I stated that nature of the research questions that will pave the way towards a particular design. So then, what sort of questions we could have under quantitative? So when designing your questions, remember the same. So I have seen most of the undergraduate research, not only in undergraduate, but also in master's and PhD level research. So the methodology adopted, it is not in line with the questions. So you have to refine your questions to suit the methodology or other way around. That is important and essential. So quantitatively bounded research questions, most of the time descriptive, comparative, and relationship bounded, even historical bounded. Historical bounded questions are not mentioned here, but I'll touch upon that as well. So I stated that there are 6 sub-designs under the quantitative. Experimental 3 designs, pre-experiment, quasi-experiment, and through experiment. Then non-experiment, 3 designs: survey, causal comparative, and correlational design. Whether to select an experimental design or non-experimental design, that is based on whether you are going to manipulate an independent variable or not. Remember that. If you are manipulating, controlling the entire the research atmosphere, so then you have to proceed with an experimental design. That is the rationale for that. If you are not controlling or manipulating an independent variable, so the best design is non-experimental design. You can either proceed with a survey or correlational design or causal comparative research. Whether to proceed with survey or whether to proceed with causal comparative or correlational design. So that is also a question for you. So you can proceed with the survey if the instruments are there. So if you can collect the data, primary data, without an issue, and the measurements are there, you will proceed with the survey design. But if you need to compare the differences in 2 or more groups, so you will proceed with a kind of a comparative design. So that is the rationale for a comparative design. Then correlational design, for an example. So most of the finance and accounting people, they collect data from financial statements. They develop proxy variables. So they proceed with time series or panel data. So they are investigating the correlations or utilizing regressions and so on. Those are correlational design. So that is the justification for that. Whether to proceed with the experimental design or non-experimental design, whether to proceed with a survey, causal comparative, or a correlational design, there is a separate justification. Remember that as well, which is not included in the slide. But I'm here discussing generally what sort of questions we can utilize, nature of the questions we can utilize for quantitative research design broadly. For 6 designs, all 6 designs. So it can be descriptive, it can be comparative, it can be relationship. In the comparative nature, you can see causal comparative design I can apply. In the relationship, so you can see, so you can either, proceed with a survey or a correlational design. If it is descriptive again, you can proceed with the survey design or even a correlational design. So what do you mean by descriptive, comparative, and relationship? So if your questions, research questions, quantify responses on 1 or more variables. For an example, if it is descriptive, broadly descriptive, for an example, what are the determinants of corporate dividend policy? What are the factors affecting employees' motivation? Likewise, a description is required, that is descriptively bounded research questions. Those are coming under quantitative again. So, for an example, what are the reasons that graduate students give for enrolling in a distance education course? So here, we quantify responses on 1 or more variables. What are the determinants of 1 variable? A dividend policy, likewise. What are the factors affecting for customer retention? Likewise. Those are descriptively bounded research question start from terminologies such as what is, what are. So you can use what form of questions here. What is, what are. So if the questions start with what is or what are, so you can simply think that, so this is a kind of a descriptively bounded research question. If it is descriptive in nature, what are the determinants, what are the factors affecting, likewise. And your questions that can be comparative as well. Comparative as well. So in the comparative designs, what you are doing is you are comparing two or more groups on some outcome variable. Outcome variable, that is the dependent variable. Here you use terminologies such as differ, compare, and so on. So for an example, what is the difference in levels of statistics anxiety between undergraduate male and female students? So if you can, measure the statistics anxiety, so then the undergraduate male and female students, so you can see a kind of a difference by utilizing tests like independent sample t-test, paired sample t-test, likewise. So that is comparative in nature. Comparative in nature. Here you are comparing two or more groups on some outcome variable. So you use differ or compare. The start question start with what again? What is the difference? What is the comparison between this and that? Likewise. The third nature of questions which we could have under the quantitative design, that is relationship bounded questions. That is concerned with trends between or among two variables, two or more variables. Here we use terminologies such as relationship, relate, association, impact, affect, trend, influence, likewise. Likewise. So for an example, what is the relationship between A and B? That is basically quantitatively bounded and relationship natured question. What is the influence of customer satisfaction on brand evangelism? Impact. So that is a relationship bounded question under the quantitative design. In addition to these three, so we can have historically bounded research questions as well. That is based on historic data. So you are having historic data and you are proceeding with either panel regression or whatever analysis in order to see the relationship. See the relationship. So relationship bounded questions we use. So the relate, relationship, association, trend, impact, effect, influence, association, likewise. So what is the impact? What is the association between? What is the relationship between? What is the impact of A on B? Likewise. And historical bounded questions, that is based on historical data sets. For an example, in finance and accountancy research, so we use data from financial statements from old ages, from 2000 to 2024. Those are the historic data. So for that also, we are utilizing quantitative design in order to see the lagged impact, even lagged impact in the sense an independent variable which is related to the previous year can have impact on the dependent variable which is related to the current year, likewise. So here also, that is also a quantitatively bounded nature of research question. So most of these questions start with what? But there is a description in descriptive bounded question, comparison in comparatively bounded question, and relationship nature is there in relationship bounded questions, and historic data, if you are analyzing, so historically bounded research questions are there. Remember that as well. So these are the four major, type of questions we can have, but you should use only one terminology, what. So you can't use why and how in quantitative research. Remember that as well. So why sort of questions we use in qualitative designs. One minute. So why sort of questions we use in qualitative design? In addition to that, how sort of questions we use in qualitative designs. So you cannot use why and how terminologies in quantitative research questions. Remember that as well. That is important. Because the reason, I'll ask some simple question. If I ask, how are you? So you cannot quantify it. So you should explore. So I'll say, I'm not well today. I'm not well today. So I'll explain what sort of, issues I do have with regard to my health today. I need an exploration. If you ask from me, how are you today? So I have to explain it in various perspectives with regard to the day, weather, so weather impact on me, so my health and my mind, whether I'm in positive or negative mindset, or motivated or demoralized mindset. Likewise, so there are so many things to be explored. So how questions should be explored then? Remember that. So I have seen most of the undergraduate research, so which utilize the quantitative designs. So you utilize how nature of question or why nature of question. If you're asking why do companies pay dividends? Likewise. So then it should be explored. You cannot give an exact answer. There is no objective answer for that. It is subjective from person to person. So that you cannot use why nature of questions in quantitative design. Remember that. So here I have taken some of the studies which we conducted, which I have supervised with the undergraduate students during the past 2 to 3 years. So we will see what sort of questions, what nature of questions it has. We will see it. So you can write it in the Q&A. The impact of mobile money adoption on financial inclusion in Sri Lanka. Mediating impact of hedonism. So this is basically based on an undergraduate research study by Asanka Kumar, one of your previous batches. So we conducted this study during 2022-23 and published in 2024. And published in the Journal of Money and Business by Emerald. So here, by simply looking at the topic, so can you describe the design for this? So write it in the Q&A. So I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes max by looking at the topic. So tell me the design, suitable design for this. Whether it is Quali or Conti, tell me. If it is Conti, So what nature of question is it? Yes, quanti, true. So what nature of a question? So I discuss about descriptively bounded research questions, comparatively bounded research questions, relationship bounded research questions, historical bounded research questions, four type of questions. So under which this is coming. So I discussed that here the impact. So we'll go back to the slide. So this is a relationship bounded question concerned with trends between or among two or more variable. Relate.
Sajid,
Yes, sir.
please contact Professor Jayantha and see what happened.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
So I'm sorry about that. So let me share the PPT now. So we were discussing about it now. So the nature of the research question. So in Q&A, I can see quanti and quantitative. So here, please look at the relationship bounded questions here. Concerned with trends between or among two or more variables. It use basically relate, relationship, association, trend, effect, influence, impact. Impact is there. So that this research, the impact of mobile money adoption. Simply it is quantitative and it is relationship bounded question. So we need a quantitative design for this. So mobile payment adoption on financial inclusion, mobile payment adoption or mobile money adoption. So we can basically operationalize it by looking at the topic itself. We can understand that mobile money adoption that can be operationalized. Operationalized in the sense, so we can, develop measurements in order to measure the same. There are already developed instruments or measurements for mobile money adoption. So already developed instruments are there for mobile money adoption. So, and also financial inclusion. There are already developed instruments in the world. So that since instruments are available and those are on survey instruments, and hedonism, that is also a survey instrument. So then we can proceed with a quantitative survey for this. So by simply looking at the title itself, you can say broadly which sort of design. It is quantitative design, then again a survey strategy. Survey that is coming under the non-experimental design. So there is a relationship between title, your nature of the research questions, objectives, and so on, and also with the design. Remember that. The second title which I have taken, so this is by one of another students, Kalpani Pigera. So she investigated the financial services employee engagement attitude towards the artificial intelligence. So the employee engagement, there are developed instruments and attitude towards the artificial intelligence. Attitude that can be measured. There are measures to measure the same. Artificial intelligence. Attitude towards something. Attitude towards new technology. So we can measure it. So it is like impact or association between financial services, employee engagement, and attitude towards artificial intelligence. We have not, mentioned the impact or association or the relationship here. But simply looking at that, so we can, assume the same. It's easy. So this paper is also published in a Scopus Index Emerald book. That is transformation for sustainable business and management practices, exploring the spectrum of the industry 5.0. So here also we utilize a quantitatively driven approach. Here it is also we utilize a quantitatively driven research question and quantitative design, a survey strategy. So the third research study. So that is also published in a book by Scopus, Index in Scopus, and publisher is Emerald. So that is by another student, the one of past students from Sabaragamuwa, Prabodhika Hansini. So she has done her study on impact of green banking practices on the environmental performance of banks, the mediating role of green financing in Sri Lanka, impact of here. Here you can see impact of. So impact, it is a relationship bounded research question coming under the quantitative in nature. So, and also green banking practices. So there are measures. The environmental performance of bank that can be also measured. The mediating role of green financing. Green financing can be measured. So all three variables we can measure utilizing survey instruments. If you are into research, so you is basically understand that there are survey instruments already developed in order to measure the same. So the fourth research question I'm going to ask you, you have to highlight it. So you have to, write the answer in the Q&A. So how has COVID-19 impacted the business performance of Sri Lanka? So here in the title itself, it says qualitative inquiry. So why this is qualitative? So I'm asking, why this is qualitative? So you have to write down the answer, why this is qualitative. Yes, how question, that is a qualitatively bounded research question, as some of you highlighted. How? So then there should be an exploration. So qualitative inquiry. So we do not need to mention it in the title itself, but it is a qualitative inquiry. So this is a study also done by one of your students, Shashini Pumika Pereira, one of the past students, I think, from 2021 or 2, she has done it. So most of these studies, by simply looking at the title itself, we can understand what sort of design we can apply by simply looking at the title itself. By looking at this title, so we can highlight the question as well. So when you are conversant with the methodology or the particular designs, you will have that understanding. So now, the next phase of our discussion that is devoted for mixed method research. So this is one of the studies which I conducted during 2018 period, mixed methods in finance research, the rationale and research designs. And this is published in Q1 journal index in Web of Science, International Journal of Qualitative Methods. So here in this study, we discuss specific research designs for finance research and also rationale for same as well. So you can download this paper from the internet. It is basically publicly available free of charge. So you can go through this and understand what sort of questions we can utilize for mixed method research, not only in finance, but also for all other domains. So you can have some kind of understanding with regard to the rationale for mixed method research. So which we'll be discussing. So as the, last phase of today's discussion. But we do have, 30 to 40 minutes maximum for this discussion. So I will not be able to enlighten you on all the aspects with regard to the selection. But by going through this, you will have some kind of understanding. So, but I need to highlight one area before discussing the rationale for mixed method design. So I'm emphasizing in my lectures as well. So when you are formulating your research questions, do not use do, does, are, is forms in formulating your questions. So do, does, are, is wordings are not allowed in developing the questions as they lead to yes or no obvious answers. So there is no investigation is needed. There is no exploration is needed. So if you're asking do, does, is, are type of questions. For an example, is there an impact of advertising on brand evangelism? This is wrong. So even in PhD studies, I have seen that researchers still use, but the researchers, the methodologies, well-known methodologies like Poth, then Ombuasi, then Creswell, they highlighted that you should not utilize these kind of questions when formulating the research questions. Remember that in this paper also we highlighted the same, not to use do, does, are, is in formulating your research questions. So next, we will look at, we discuss about 6 type of research designs under the mixed methodology. So what sort of questions we could have? So we are going to discuss it now. Nature of the questions for mixed method designs: sequential explanatory design, sequential exploratory design, then sequential transformative design, concurrent design, concurrent transformative design, concurrent embedded design. Six designs. What sort of questions we could have? So research questions lead for particular research design, mixed methods. So this is not essential for undergraduates, but I wanted to highlight this because in this audience, I know that there are some, postgraduate students, even academics are there from various countries also. There are participants for this program. So even though we develop it for our Sabaragamuwa University management faculty students, we know that the audience is very diverse. And if someone is from our audience also, targeted audience also, if someone is doing a mixed method study, so you should have some kind of understanding with regard to the formulation of research questions for a particular mixed method design. That's why I have taken this part to the consideration today. So sequential explanatory design. So you know, quantitative followed up by qualitative in the sequential explanatory design. There is a sequence, quantitative first, qualitative then, qualitative next. And also this is with regard to both data collection and data analysis. Not only data collection, but also the data analysis. There is a sequence, quanti first, quali second. So what is the difference in perceived barriers to reading empirical research articles? Perceived barriers to reading empirical research articles between graduate students with low level of reading comprehension and those with high level of reading comprehension. So difficult question. What is the difference in? So here we are discussing about a difference. So you could remember, even though this is a sequential explanatory design, so difference we discuss about under the comparative nature of quantitative questions. Remember that. Comparative here differ. So quantitative part is there already in this question. Why quali? That is the question. So here in this question, so low level of reading comprehension and high level of reading comprehension. So if you have already tested, I mean, marks on this, so you can proceed with a quantitative design. But since you do not know the high level of reading comprehension, students with high level of reading comprehension, low level of reading comprehension, so you do not know about it. So first, you need to basically conduct a research in order to understand examination, in order to understand the low level of reading comprehension, students with low level of reading comprehension and students with high level of reading comprehension. You can have a test, quantitative test for that. So then you will have the different two groups. Then you have to see perceived barriers to reading empirical articles for them. Perceived barriers to reading empirical research articles. So there is a exploration required because the perceived barriers are different from low level of reading, students with low level of reading comprehension and high level of reading comprehension. As the second stage, you should conduct a qualitative study. So that's why it is sequential explanatory design. First, you conduct a quantitative test to determine the level of reading comprehension. Secondary, so you are proceeding with a qualitative study in order to determine what are the perceived barriers as thematic analysis, as themes. You will understand these are the themes. Then even as the third stage also you can conduct, a quantitative study to see the difference. So by looking at this question, I can say this is more than a sequential explanatory design as well. There are some questions we need more than 2 designs in the same study, more than 2. So there are some questions in the box. So let me look at that as well. Okay, there are no questions. So first, we conduct a quantitative pace in order to determine the high level of reading comprehension and low level of reading comprehension. Then a qualitative study. Two, we will do some qualitative interviews in order to see what are the perceived barriers to reading empirical research articles. So there can be difference in both groups. So then as the third stage also, you can do a quantitative research again to see the difference. That is threefold again. 3 stages are there. But it is a sequential explanatory. The reason is that quanti first, then quali. So here, by looking at the question itself, so you can see sequential explanatory design is there. So that is the rationale. That is the rationale. So that's why I stated that the nature of the research question always drives toward a particular research design. Then the second research question, that is sequential exploratory design. Here sequence is there, but exploratory part comes first. Quali followed up by quanti. Quali first, quanti second. So look at the question, research question. What is the difference in general mood among male and female investors regarding stock price fluctuation? So general mood here, general mood. So there are theories like the preferences of the investors. So in order to determine that, so there are theories called catering theory of dividends. Catering theory of dividends. But general mood, if you consider it about it, it is so abstract. In catering theory also, investors' preference, that is measured through a proxy called dividend premium. Dividend premium is calculated by having some numerical, a formula. But investors' preference, so abstract concept. So it is basically fundamentally wrong to determine an abstract concept like investors' preference utilizing a proxy variable like dividend premium. Here also we do have the same problem. General mood, so abstract concept. There are no measurements developed. Assume that there are no measurements developed. So then, in order to see the general mood, difference in general mood among male and female investors regarding stock price fluctuations. So all the things are numerical, but general mood cannot be basically operationalized. So that since it is an abstract concept, so there is a requirement for an exploration to develop an instrument to measure the general mood. So here qualitative part comes first. Quali followed up by quanti. So the sequential exploratory design. When there are research questions or topics which requires a kind of exploration first in order to develop an instrument at the first stage. So the best design is the sequential exploratory design. In the qualitative phase, first you will develop the instrument. So the outcome of the, quali phase, that can be the instrument development. So instrument testing, it is a mix design. So once this is basically, the instrument is developed in order to measure the general mood. So then we can see the difference. So in this quantitative phase, we can see the difference in general mood among the male and female investors regarding a particular phenomenon. Here the stock price fluctuations. The third type of the mixed method design, that is sequential transformative design. You could remember sequential transformative design. Sequence is there. It is quanti comes first or quali comes first, either way. But transformative theories plays a vital role. So for an example, how management decides the payout policy and what factors affect their decisions. Here I have taken 2 questions in a single research question. How management decide the payout policy? And what factors affect their decisions? There are 2 questions. So how management decide the payout policy? That is a qualitatively bounded research question. The reason, because the question starts with how. What factors affect their decisions? It is a descriptively bounded quantitative question. What factors? Descriptive. So here, descriptively and quantitatively bounded question is there. Qualitatively bounded research question is there. But when it comes to the payout policy, there are 14 theories which explain the dividend policy or the payout policy, starting from signaling theory, catering theory, life cycle theory, pre-cash flow theory, stakeholder theory. So likewise, there are 14 theories. So meaning that theoretical base is playing a major role. So here we can have a sequential order, but theories plays a vital role. Sequential order is that, so first we have to see how management decide the payout policy, then what factors affect their decisions. So quali followed up by quanti, but a sequence or the theory plays a vital role here. So the nature of the questions drive a particular research design in mixed methodology as well. Development of mixed method research questions, that is really difficult. That is really difficult. So you should devote months in developing this type of questions. Remember that as well. So the next design, that is concurrent triangulation design. Concurrent triangulation, the data collection and analysis of quali and quanti phases at the same time. Concurrent. For an example, assume that the low level of reading comprehension and the high level of reading comprehension, that is already known. We have already conducted a quantitative test, and test results are there. So we know who are the low level students with low level of reading comprehension, who are the students with high level of reading comprehension. I'm taking the previous example, the first example itself. So now we know. So now you can proceed with the concurrent triangulation strategy. You can conduct both qualitative and quantitative parts at the same time. So here, what is the difference between or relationship between in order to, measure the relationship. So then the level of reading comprehension and their perception of barriers that prevent them from reading empirical research articles, perception of barriers. So both the phases that can be done at the same time. So it is coming under the concurrent triangulation design. This is so complex research questions which I discuss here. Some of these questions you can find it in this article. It is well explained in this article. So the next design, that is concurrent embedded design. Concurrent embedded in the sense both the phases, quali and quanti, at the same time, but embedded in the sense one particular design plays the major role while the other design providing a supportive role. What are the factors affecting adoption of mobile banking, and why do customers use mobile banking during the pandemic? So what are the factors affecting adoption of mobile banking? So you can have thousands of sample with a sample size justification as a survey. So then from that, so you can interview 10 people out from the same sample in order to determine why do customers use mobile banking during the pandemic, if the research is conducted during the pandemic. So here, the factors affecting adoption of mobile payment, so that is the quantitative pace, qualitative pace. Why do customers use mobile banking? Qualitative pace. It is concurrently. So, but it is again embedded because quantitative pace plays the major role, whereas qualitative pace plays a supportive role. That's why it is called as concurrent embedded design. The last one, concurrent transformative strategy. Transformative, that is theory back approach. So the quali and quanti data collection and analysis at the same time, whereas theories plays a major role, significant role. What is the relationship between health-related behavior and mobile payment adoption during the pandemic? In this question, so yeah, investigating the relationship. So it is a quantitative again, but in order to have a confirmation, we can have a qualiphase as well. In a concurrent design, It is not embedded again. We are not taking from the, taking one, the particular qualitative one as a supportive role. Both phases plays the major role. But here, if you consider about the health-related behavior, there are different models developed, theories developed, like health belief model and so on. And mobile payment adoption, again, there are so many theories developed, backed by the theory. So the best suited approach for this, that is concurrent transformative strategy. So here, by looking at these questions, nature of these questions, you can simply design what sort of research design is applicable. So as I stated at the beginning, the research nature of the research questions or nature of the objectives that basically guide which design to select. So there is a rationale for other triangulation approaches as well. Triangulation, so I'm not going to discuss this today. So even though, so I don't think that this is not necessary for you, but if you need to explain it, please write it in the Q&A. You need it, so I'll explain that as well in 5 to 10 minutes. Yes, there is a question. Can we conduct relationship research using mixed method? Yes, we can do. Because for an example, the reason is this. So you are investigating a relationship, but you need to have a confirmation within the same study. So justification is to have a confirmation and completeness within a single study. So you can do it. So we are basically from a pragmatist viewpoint. We will see what works best rather than paradigmatic differences, even in terms of questions as well. So it is a relationship bounded research question. Relationship bounded, it should come. So we should proceed with quantitative design. So then I'm mixed method contradictory to what I'm saying. But from a pragmatist viewpoint, pragmatists believe on what works best. So pragmatism the broader philosophy. So we believe in what works best, despite of these differences. Still you can do. Justification is from the philosophical viewpoint itself. I think you are clear on this. So if you need to have need to discuss the rationale for other triangulation approaches, please write it in the Q&A. So then I'll explain. If not, so we can wind up the discussion for today. So without taking much time, so I'll explain. So I'm not going to explain it in deep, but a brief explanation. So I'll give you. So data triangulation, it is similar to the multi-method approach. Multi-method approach we discuss here. Multi-method approach in the research choices. Research choices. Here I stated that two strategies in a single study in the same paradigm. Grounded theory with ethnography, survey with experiment, likewise. The same paradigm, two strategies together. We call it as multi-method. So we call it as data triangulation or within the method triangulation as well. Within the method triangulation as well. So data triangulation or within the method triangulation or multi-method, so that is conducted in order to have a confirmation within a single study. For an example, assume that here there is example. Dividend policy determinants of Sri Lankan firms, a triangulation approach. Why we use the data triangulation here? That is the question, the rationale for that. If you see the dividend policy determinants across the world, there are more than, 1,000 research articles published. There are ample research being carried out every day in order to investigate the dividend policy determinants. But there is a contradiction with regard to the findings, not only in the different contexts, but also in the same context as well. So that if we want to have a single consensus within the same study, so you can apply a data triangulation approach where you can utilize, for an example, if this, since this is determinants, what are the determinants? So that is a descriptively bounded research question, quantitative. So then you can use a survey with a correlational design. In this research, we conducted a survey with the correlational design. The purpose or the rationale for that is in order to have a single consensus within the same study when there are contradictions in the same context itself in the existing studies. So then, investigator triangulation. Investigator triangulation in the sense that utilization of multiple investigators, multiple data collectors, multiple researchers in a single study. So assume that there is investigator bias. So data collector bias in the entire process. So we need to eliminate. So then you can have multiple investigators, multiple data collectors on board and do separately the analysis with regard to the data collected by separate data collectors or separate investigators and see whether there is a difference in order to see whether there is a bias or not, in order to eliminate the biases. So if there is a consensus over all the samples collected by the different investigators, data collectors, so then we can say that we have proceeded with the investigator triangulation, say there is no significant difference in the findings. If there is a difference in findings, then again we have to look back the entire research process and correct it. That is essential. The third triangulation approach, that is the theoretical triangulation. So meaning that there are multiple theories which explain the same phenomena. Same phenomena. So that if there are multiple theories which explain the same phenomena, So then you have to incorporate or amalgamate the theories to explain the phenomena. So we call it as utilization of multiple theories in order to explain a phenomena. So we call it as theoretical triangulation. Remember one thing, the reason here, in order to use the theoretical triangulation is that, so there are multiple theories with same set of assumptions, not different set of assumptions. So in the theoretical triangulation, you cannot triangulate the theories with different set of assumptions. For an example, so without taking much time, so I'll explain. So in corporate finance, there are some theories. For an example, Modigliani and Miller in 1961 developed the dividend irrelevance theory. So in the assumption of perfect capital market, but which is not existed in the world. Later on, the dividend relevance theories were developed, like signaling theory, pre-cash flow theory, and so on. So you cannot, incorporate dividend irrelevance theory with relevance theories. So assumptions are different when you are proceeding with theoretical triangulation. So the theories which you are triangulating, it should have same set of assumptions. Otherwise, it will be a poor theoretical triangulation. So multiple triangulation in the sense that use of more than one triangulation method. So we call it as multiple triangulation. It is with the purpose of rational to doing that is, again, in order to have a confirmation within a single study. So here there are some of the studies which we conducted utilizing data triangulation and other triangulation approaches. Here you can see. So as the summary, so I would like to highlight that the rationale for selecting a research design, it is mostly the research question, nature of the research question, or nature of the research problem that drives the particular research design. There is a connectivity. And from the title itself. But researchers in the world, they are basically based on their researchers' interests, their competencies, their experiences as highlighted earlier, and resource availability, and also based on the audience, they select a particular design. But my suggestion is to select the design without considering the secondary factors, but based on the nature of the research problem. If you can select a particular design, that would be most appropriate. So with that, so if there are questions, so I would like to give you, 2 to 3 minutes, so you can write it down in the Q&A, so I'll answer. So if not, so we can wind up the session for today. It seems that there are no questions, so I believe that, so with that, we can wind up the session. So thank you very much for listening. So I hope you got something new from this session. So I would like to request everyone to apply the knowledge you obtain from this series when you are conducting your research study and when you are writing your thesis or dissertation as well. So I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, so thank you, Professor Dewasiri. So good evening to the distinguished guests and the respected audience. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose the word of uh, thanks on behalf of the Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa, University of Sri Lanka, for the successful completion of the 5th session of the Thesis Mastery Program 2025. So first and foremost, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the main speaker of today's session and the main coordinator of the Thesis Mastery Program, Professor Jayantha and Dewasiri from the Department of Accountancy and Finance, Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa, University of Sri Lanka. Sir, it was indeed an inspiring and enlightening session. So at the outset, I would like to express my profound gratitude to the Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa University of Sri Lanka, headed by Professor Atula Gnanapalu. Further, I would like to express my special gratitude to Professor G.Y. Pires, Head Department of Accountancy and Finance, Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa University of Sri Lanka, whose visionary approach and dedication played a pivotal role in initiating this program. Next, my deepest gratitude goes to the organizing committee, particularly to Ms. Shanika Ratnasiri, Ms. Madhusha Amarasena, Ms. Lakmini Walakungura, Mr. Sajit Karunaratne, and Mr. Dakshina Pattabandi, who meticulously planned and executed every aspect of this thesis mastery program. Finally, I would like to sincerely thank the audience, including academic researchers and the research students, for their active participation. Hope you all will join for the Thesis Mastery Program Session 6 on Designing with Purpose, Developing Research Proposals for Qualitative, Quantitative and Mixed Method Studies by Professor Iraj Ratnayaka, Department of Tourism Management, Faculty of Management Studies, Sabaragamuwa, University of Sri Lanka. So thank you all again. Have a pleasant evening.